This meeting of the trustees of the trust funds to order.
All right, am I online now?
I can hear you, but I cannot see. Oh, there you are.
No.
So you are now online,
Okay. So
and I
perhaps
guess
you
that
will-
means you can take over. I yield the virtual chair to the chair.
And I thank you. All right, let me just organize myself here slightly. Only because that was the wrong way to do it. Yeah, all right, so moving on to the agenda. I think actually our first order of business is make sure that we've got a quorum and the right number of folks there. So I can only see, at this point, I can only see myself.
Well, that's okay. In the room here, there's myself and there's Victor, so we do have three, and we do have to go through the Zoom protocol.
Okay, so, yeah, I think, just to admit me, but we also, I think, somehow we gotta get Victor sitting as alternate too.
Oh, that's right. I guess we need to designate Victor as alternate.
So I think probably the way to do that is, first, just as you as acting chair to simply say that we've satisfied the Zoom protocol and I'm now present.
I think we have satisfied the Zoom protocol, since I can see you and you can see me, and we have a quorum.
We have a quorum. And so I would ask for a motion to install Victor Sosa as a substitute for Alberto Manalo at today's meeting.
I will make a motion to have Victor Sosa sit in for Alberto Manalo at today's meeting.
And I'll second that. And then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And aye, and then opposed, nay. You can't vote yet, so you can't negate your own appointment.
Nay.
So, with that, and Victor will be our sit as alternate trustee for Alberto today.
All right, I can help you out with public input since you can't see the room, but there are no members of the public presence. We'll leave that open until 9.
All right, well done. Approval of the agenda.
Care to move approval of the agenda?
Yeah, I was just looking to see if I have just, in my own mind, added something to issues brought forward by the trustees at the end, so I don't think we actually have to change that. And
Should we make note that we are going to change the date of the meeting, of the May meeting?
I think we can do that as part of the issues.
All right.
As well. Yeah, so let me skip forward to that item under issues brought forward by the trustees. Karen Edwards reminded me that we needed to elect, appoint, or do whatever officers for the group. I assume that you're still willing to carry forward on the chairing of the cemetery committee.
That is a fair assumption. Yes, I'm happy to continue doing it.
And I'm happy to do my part, and I think I'll do his part, but or continue his part. What I see at the moment is, because Alberto, I think I have a hard time without his direct acknowledgement and acceptance needed to table that appointment of, or reappointment of officers. Does that make sense?
I think so. I'll make note of it.
Okay. Yeah, if nominated, I will not run. Elected, I will not serve. We need to give Alberto a chance to say, yeah, I don't want to do the same. Although he just got reelected. But maybe he wants to be chair. I don't know. I'm not chair for, I'm not like Mao, I'm not chairman for life.
Chairman for life.
So we'll move on to that. Does that seem logical?
Yeah, I'll make note of that in the minutes. I'll put it under new business, but I'll make note of that in the minutes that we're going to defer action on that.
All right.
Since I am apparently secretary this morning as well.
Be a busy man. Well, we'll try to keep the chit chat to a minimum, so you don't have to write thousands of things. With no action on that item, I think what we need to do then is approve the agenda. And I'll make the motion that we approve the agenda.
I second it.
Well, maybe Victor should make it. Maybe somebody other than me should move the agenda. Be approved.
I move that we approve the agenda.
I will second
Great,
the
thank
agenda.
you. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. The agenda is approved. The next item of business is approval of the minutes of March 28th, which Alberto had sent around. Can I have a motion to approve those?
I move that we approve the minutes.
A second?
I will second that motion.
All right, any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of March 28th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And
I
opposed?
should abstain since I was not at that meeting.
You're right. So just Victor and I will say aye.
Okay.
Well, unless Victor wants to say nay. Those saying nay, hearing none, motion carried. Okay, so our minutes are approved. We'll take those. Under continuing business, all right. Under continuing business, there was, for the Doe Farm and the Land Stewardship Subcommittee, I guess first I can report that our consulting forester is working on the management plan and hopes to have a, well, not a complete and polished version by mid-June or in time for our meeting later in June. It'll be really close. I had a nice conversation with him about having a pretty solid document by then, if nothing else, but to help patients to the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, who is putting up some of the funds to prepare this. And they'd like to have something, at least a draft form, in order to pay out their grant, which apparently turns into a pumpkin on July 1st. So with the expert, they want to make sure they get the money moved. So that's what's happening on the plan. Well, an additional thing on the planning side, Charlie and I and Veronique Luddington, our land stewardship coordinator, and Ariana's last name escapes me at the minute, but somebody from the Rockingham County Conservation District, the person who has been in charge of dealing with the invasives. We're all going to meet at the Doe Farm on Monday, May 12 at 9 a.m. To kind of go through some suggestion regarding mapping the hot spots for the invasive species. That'll get full. And you all are welcome to join us in tick country that morning and walk around. Come out and hear a little bit about what's going on, or you can come and go as you please. But it'll be Monday, May 12th, 9 a.m. at the Doe Farm. All right. Any questions on Doe Farm?
Nope.
Okay. The other piece had to do with the Land Stewardship Subcommittee, and they did not have a quorum for an official meeting in April, so it was largely just a discussion, and specifically we went about looking at so-called permitted uses and non-permitted uses, mostly property by property, but the general consensus was there probably ought to be a set of things that you're welcome to do and things that you're not welcome to do, and then have those clearly defined for all the properties, and then any specific inclusions or exclusions would be so noted property by property. So trying to be consistent with what we do. Related to that, it came up that of all the properties that are out there, the Doe Farm is the only one that has any provision for camping. Specifically, I believe the sign on the Moat Island says camping by permission only, or something to that effect. And that means, well, then people ask, well, where do you get permission? Well, the answer is apparently the DPW, Rich Ryan's office would be doing that. And historically, the only camping we've actually ever permitted down there for the last decade plus has been the Boy Scouts, and now the Scouts, mostly in exchange for some of their labor pulling invasive species out of the ground as permits. Apparently they have not made use of that opportunity, although they have continued to provide some labor pulling invasive species, but their interest in using the island as a campsite largely evaporated. The last time, I think Rich actually reached out to the Scoutmaster and asked, what they wanted to do, and he never really heard back. So it was his impression that they were not. They have alternatives now, and they go elsewhere, and it was the general feeling of the folks at the Land Stewardship Council that we probably could just go to a no camping policy at the Doe Farm, because the only people we ever let camp there were the Boy Scouts, and it's a pain in the neck to get a permit for both the town and the Scouts, if they even remembered to do that right. And it would be much more clear to people going by that, yeah, no, we can't camp here, and two, it would be consistent with the other policies. So I reminded the Land Stewardship Subcommittee that the trustees are responsible for the Doe Farm, and that I would bring that to all of you for input before anybody changed the policy. So that's a long explanation. So any reaction?
So let me just kind of quickly summarize this so I have it straight in my mind. I apologize because I wasn't at the last meeting where this was likely discussed. But so has there been a request to bar camping? I know it has created issues out there in the past.
Yeah, the request is essentially from, I guess, the combination of the Land Stewardship Subcommittee, and as director of DPW, to have a policy that's consistent with how we deal with all the other properties, no camping. Um, And de facto, the way it works now is the only people we permit to camp there are the Boy Scouts or the Scouts, and they appear not to be interested in doing so anymore.
All right, thanks for the brief explanation. I mean, my thought is that if we are sure that the Scouts don't more, then there's no reason to have any process in place by which we allow camping. I agree. I don't think it's such a great thing to have people camping out there, creating all sorts of problems as we have known over the years, and making it consistent with the rest of the properties in town. You can't camp at Wagon Hill, right? I think that makes sense.
It's easier to administer that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's value in consistency. You know, my only concern would be if the Scouts someday wanted to cut the case. I don't see the point.
Yeah, and that's, we haven't had to deal with the Scouts camping out there since I've been on the board. So we're up to 3 years and change. And, you know, as Rich says, he's reached out and not had any response back. I guess what I would like to do, is that the sense of the trustees is that we should be consistent with the rest of the properties and relieve the DPW of the burden of having to administer, and then leaving this kind of open question to people who are coming there and thinking they can camp. Well, now the sign says no camping versus camping by permission. Well, where do you get permission? And well, we'll get permission. You know, better to apologize than ask permission or something like that. I forget how that goes. So now it would be clear. I do have this sort of feeling: are we closing the door to a group that's been useful? Yeah, maybe. But
Well, you're maintaining an exception for one property alone. So wouldn't it be better to have a consistent policy for all of the properties? And if an exception is to be made, leave it up to DPW to have a process for that.
works for me. Yeah, I, as you both have observed, consistency is very useful.
Yeah.
So if that's the sense of the group here, I will relay that back to the Land Stewardship Subcommittee next meeting, and steps will be taken to remove that particular sign and replace it with a no camping sign. Do we need a vote, or should we just leave it as a sense of the committee? Or the sense of the trustees?
I'm not sure. I mean, the Land Stewardship Subcommittee, I mean, technically doesn't the final say over what goes on at Doe Farm, so it's my sense we probably ought to go on record as having a vote on this.
Okay. So we should like to get a motion to change the policy of use at the Doe Farm to now indicate there is no camping allowed at the Doe Farm.
So moved.
And a second.
I will second.
Additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the policy barring camping at the Doe Farm is indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Done. Motion carried. Great, thank you. I think that's the right move and will help matters out at the Doe Farm substantially. Does the Cemetery Committee?
The cemetery committee report is fairly short. There have been no sales and no burials since our last meeting on March 28th. However, the cemetery is dried out enough, and the frost is out of the ground, and we are reopened. So there likely will be a sale this week. We're dealing with a situation of a sudden and unexpected death. So Ted, I'll talk to you about getting that deed signed kind of out of cycle. But likely we will have a sale that takes place almost right away for a burial next week. So I'll take care of that. I'm kind of in the middle arrangements, and that's sort of the first of the burial of the spring. The only other thing that's going on out there is a lot of monument work, which is typical. Monuments can be worked on over the winter and then installed in the spring. So there's several monuments, from last year's burials going up now. I'm busy coordinating a little bit of that. But that's the cemetery committee.
Okay. Yeah, although I'm not aware of the specific circumstances, I did hear from somebody who was connected to the event, the unexpected thing, and they were flopping around and wondering. The question that I received was, did I know somebody who was an estate lawyer that could help people out, because they didn't really weren't expecting to have to deal with it. So, yeah, sad event. Okay, any additional questions for the cemetery committee? All right, hearing none, we can move on. At our last meeting, we talked a little bit about the Dorothy Wilcox Trust. And one of the things that we thought would be, as I recall, we thought would be useful to somehow institutionalize the idea in the minds of the DPW that they would, any time they were thinking about, well, we got stuff to do, is there stuff to do at the little park or the town landing? And if so, is this stuff that they could tap into the Dorothy Wilcox Trust for? I sent that, I kind of coordinated with Todd Sillig and Rich Shrine, and they both thought it was a fine idea that they would, the DPW would in effect kind of automatically think about that going forward. And so the money just wouldn't keep accruing in the trust and raising questions among the supporters of that trust about, well, why aren't we spending it? So have a more proactive DPW thinking about, oh, we could use a couple $1,000s to do X on one, and they would just then make the request to us. The way I understand it, in the trust, the DPW is the decision maker in terms of what gets done, and proposing that we use those monies. The friends of Dorothy Wilcox are not formally decision makers about the trust. They're not named in the trust. In fact, nobody's named in the trust. So, they're concerned members of the public, and I think the concerns that they brought forward were legitimate, and if we can now get the DPW to follow up on a regular basis, then I think that those monies will be expended. So, any questions on that?
None here in this room.
Nope.
Okay.
Good result.
Yeah, I think so. So, the next piece is the Wagon Hill Farm Heritage Expendable Trust. So, the folks that are working on the rebuild of the the house out there. Apparently, at some point over the last few weeks, they secured a grant from somebody, oh, a bank. And someone suggested, oh, well, just drop it in there's a town, there's a trust for the historical district. You know, just drop it in there. And Deb Alstrom said, no, this is a grant. We're going to put it in just in the town account and spend it. There's no point in putting it in trust, just put it in over here, and it's going to get spent really fast. There's no reason to trust. And the subsequent conversation was, well, there probably are people who would like to make donations for that project, and maybe there should be a trust. And somewhere along the way, I chimed in. I said, yeah, well, that's, they could, if they put it in the trust, and, the historic district probably would be just fine managing that and making requests to us to spend money in accord with the trust. But we might get to a point where people were making donations to the trust, and the purpose of that donation, which they heretofore had thought was for the Wagon Hill stuff, it just gets commingled with everything else in the historic, whatever the name of the particular trust is. And, when the Wagon Hill project gets done, now what do you do with any leftover money? So, with that in mind, the folks that were interested in doing this, as well as the town council, said, how about we set up a Wagon Hill Farm Heritage Trust, which will handle management activities at the Heritage Farm, at Wagon Hill of all kinds, including the renovations of the house and the operations thereof. So it would be a more general thing, not unlike the Doe Farm, in the sense that here's a specific piece of property with a specific trust that will help with the management, and people who want to make donations to that may do so. And then they sent a draft around and included me in that, and they seemed to be moving very quickly, so I apologize for not sharing it all of you. Most of the details weren't particularly I did ask for a couple of changes, and that was one, to make it clear that the principal of the trust is also expendable. So that's why the word expendable shows up in that trust name, to make it clear to everybody that it's not just the income that comes in from the trust, but also the principal itself. And the other was that they had, in their drafting, indicated that they could spend the interest, and recognizing that we get dividends and capital returns as well as interest, and a broad range of income beyond interest. I suggested that they change the word from interest to income, so that anything coming in as a result of our investment operations would go into, and that's what we call everything that we deal with is income. We don't use the term interest or dividends or capital appreciation or any of that other kind of stuff. It's all income. So that's what happened with, and I believe that instrument is going, it will be a resolution of the town council. I don't think it's I don't think it's been to the council yet. It may show up at their May meeting. So if we had any additional concerns, I suppose we could weigh in, but that's sort of where we are. Any questions on that?
Nope.
None in this room. Sounds good.
Because I didn't get in person today, I didn't see whether we had any expenditure requests. but I had sent email to Deb and asking if there were any, and I didn't hear back from her. That doesn't mean there aren't any, but I didn't get a chance to look in the trustees' mailbox.
I'll check the mailbox after the meeting and we can follow up if need be.
Yeah, in most cases, this stuff is small enough, and it's, you know, the bills get paid out of other town accounts and the money gets moved around afterwards, so it's, I don't think there's a pressing issue. All right. The next item on the agenda is the monthly MS9 spreadsheets, and my review of them didn't indicate anything exciting because we haven't spent any money, so nothing's really changed. Of course, the values of things have changed, but other than that, things seem pretty straightforward. Did other folks have an opportunity spreadsheets?
I have to confess that this time around I did not.
All right, then I think we probably should postpone approving the latest spreadsheet until everybody's had a chance to look at those. So maybe, could I have a motion to table the monthly review of the MS9 spreadsheet?
I will make a motion to table the review of this month's MS9s until our next meeting in May.
I think technically this is we're in an April meeting, so it's the March.
Of that?
Yeah, it's the
Seconded.
March. All right, any further discussion? Hearing, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, none, motion is carried, so it is tabled until our next meeting. So the next item is the May meeting date. The tentative date of March 23rd is,
I think you meant May 23rd.
yeah, you're right, May 23rd. Time flies. And that is the beginning of Memorial Day weekend. And I heard, at least from our technology expert, Craig Stevens, that he would not be available, and so there wouldn't be any recording. I'm going to be out of country, so it's really kind of up to all of you. And then I think I heard somewhere else that the 23rd was not a good day. And so we were tinkering with the idea Friday the 16th. And I've heard back positively from most folks, so if we should move forward. Is there any other information or discussion that we should have about that?
Nope.
All right, our next meeting day, I will then now reach out to Cambridge Trust because they had a conflict for today. I guess Chris Lucas had a conflict and could not come, and since he's the main part of the presentation, I didn't really want to transfer that burden completely over to the new person, Lori. If nothing else, we get a consistency from one presentation to the next, so we all know what's going on. So I'll reach out to Cambridge Trust, see if they're available on the 16th. I don't think there will be a problem for them. So then we can get our first quarter update in before the first quarter gets too far away. That makes sense?
Sounds good to us.
All right. I rattled, so we've already postponed the officers, and I don't think additional, so what do you folks have?
I don't have anything additional. Do you, Victor?
Nope.
All right. Nobody in this room does either. And I'll note for the benefit of the Zoom protocol that we have passed 9 o'clock. There are no members of the public around to make comment, and perhaps Craig could tell us if anyone's on Zoom.
Just Ted.
So no one online either.
No. It's not the most exciting meeting that happens on the planet. So I'm not surprised that we're not overwhelmed with folks.
As always, the master of understatement.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think we're probably in good shape in terms of this month's meeting.
Well, then, if you will entertain a motion to adjourn, I will make that motion.
Okay, and I probably could use a second. All right, all those, any discussion? Anybody want to stay longer? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning today's meeting indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, abstained. I will make the gavel closing motion with my hand.
Yes.
And Craig can